Hello everyone and welcome back to the Women's World Chess Championship between the reigning champion Ju Wenjun and the challenger Aleksandra Goryachkina. The first 12 games ended in a draw, but not all 12 games were drawn. The match was drawn, but 6 of the games were decisive. Goryachkina won 3 and Ju Wenjun won 3, so it wasn't like in the Carlsen Caruana snooze fest. And now they go into the rapid tiebreaks. So the first game of the rapid tiebreaks ended in a draw. Second game also ended in a draw, and this is the third game of the rapids, which I decided to show, as it is a very nice game. So without further ado, let's check it out. And we do have a nice photo of this matchup. There you have it. Knight to f3 is on the board. So let's just enjoy that for a second. Let's now show the game. So knight to f3 by Ju Wenjun, and we have d5 by Goryachkina. We have g3 and c6, strengthening the center, bishop to g2, and immediately bishop to g4. So Goryachkina wants to close the position while the light square bishop is out, so you don't have problems with the development of the light square bishop later on. We have castles and knight to d7. h3, pushing the bishop back, bishop to h5, and now d4, grabbing space in the center. We have e6. Now the cage is closed, the bishop is nicely out of the cage, and now c4. We have bishop to e7 when we have a trade in the center, c captures, e captures, and the knight to c3. So this has all been played before, and now you have to decide whether you want to continue knight to gf6. However, you Ju Wenjun decides that this knight should not come to e5, because it's either going to be an excellent outpost for the knight, or you can just start pushing, and it's you will have a very strong center, or you can capture with the knight, and then you get d captures on e5, which will grab more space in the center for white. So here Wenjun decides to capture on f3, and here there is one notable game that reached this position. Last year in Prague, Pentala Harikrishna had it against David Navara, and Harikrishna played bishop captures on f3. That game ended in a draw, but here Ju Wenjun goes for e captures on f3, which really changes the character of the position with the pawns looking the way they look. Breaks the pawn chain, has 3 pawn islands now, but I guess it's something she prepared, and she will test it in a rapid game against Aleksandra Goryachkina. And it is as of move 10 that we have a completely new game. So Goryachkina continues to develop, knight to g2 f6, and now h4, as the light square bishop is not doing all that much here, and you don't want to push the f-pawn since it nicely controls the knight, so the knight cannot use e4 and g4. You want to transfer your light square bishop to control this diagonal. We have castles by Goryachkina, bishop to h3, and now knight to b6. The knight can now come to c4, for example, which will be a nice square. Queen to d3, and now rook to e8. Continuing development with b3, now taking away a4 and c4 from black's knight. And knight f to d7. Here you make room for the bishop to come on f6, but also you want to remaneuver your knight via f8 to maybe e6 or g6 later on. So rook to e1, and now bishop to f6, offering a trade of rooks. With bishop to d2, so now if black trades, you can recapture with the rook, and now a5. Starting to expand on the queen side. We have king g2, improving the position of the king a little bit, and now knight to f8. We have rook captures on e8, queen captures, and now rook to e1, for the moment winning the e-file. Queen back to d8, and now comes knight to d1. The knight is now also being shifted to e3, from where you will control g4 and f5. So knight b to d7, now with ideas that you can start further expanding on the queen side, but also at some point you might also want to be interested in pushing c5. We have knight to e3, and now queen to b6, putting pressure on the d4 pawn. And when the knight comes to e6, the knight will add even more pressure to the d4 pawn. So bishop to c3 defending, and now a4. A4 by black. With the idea that after captures you might get a nice way to get a rook lift in. So b4, of course, Ju Wenjun wants to keep the a file closed, and now knight to e6, adding a third attacker to the d4 pawn. And here Ju Wenjun decides that now it's time to capture the knight. So bishop captures, pawn captures. Now black gets a stronger center. If black can get e5, then he gets rid of she gets rid of her, well, backwards e6 pawn, so knight to g4. Putting pressure on the bishop, but also keeping an eye on the e5 square. We have rook to e8, preparing e5, but again f4, preventing it. And here, queen back to d8. And the queen is not very useful on b6, so we want to find different ways to get her back into the game. And here, as you can see, b4 and d4 prevent a breakthrough on c5 from ever happening. And it's the same here. e5 is nicely controlled, so black will never be able to execute e5. So here, you don't have to worry about the queen side. That's closed. The center is closed, so it's time to start playing on the king side. So h5. We have h6 by black, and then now comes rook to e3. b5 right away is possible. If b5, then, for example, captures, you immediately go after the two weaknesses. But first, rook to e3. Ju Wenjun says, okay, first I'm going to improve the position of my rook, then I'm going to go for this breakthrough. And as black doesn't have any breakthroughs or no way to actually help her pieces, but this rook to e3 actually gives black the chance to play b5, but Goryachkina doesn't. Goryachkina plays king to h8 instead, and this was a very valuable moment. That b5 move should have been played. So here we have b5, just with the idea that if captures, queen's going to attack the b7 pawn and the a4 pawn, knight to b8, and now queen to e2. Now putting pressure on the e6 pawn as well. C captures on b5 now, and here queen captures on b5. You could also go for captures on f6 first, but the threat is stronger than the execution, as they say. So queen captures on b5, putting pressure on the two pawns here. Queen to c8, you cannot defend both of them, and now comes queen captures on a4. So grabbing a pawn, but now knight to c6. And again, there is some pressure on the d4 pawn. We have bishop back to b2, now with ideas of maybe shifting the rook over to c3 if needed, but also you can switch this bishop to this diagonal if you'll need to. So rook to e7, now preparing to meet rook c3 with rook to c7, but now queen to c2. Again, pinning the knight since the queen on c8 would be undefended. We have queen to e8 getting out of the way and also preventing queen to g6. Queen to g6 would be very dangerous, for example, followed by knight captures on h6. So now knight captures on f6, g captures, and now bishop to a3. Kicking away the rook, we have rook to g7, and now finally the breakthrough. We have f5. And okay, e5, we have d captures, f captures, and now f6, a very strong pass pawn. And here, rook to g5. Maybe somewhat more resilient was rook to g8, but still, queen f5, threatening f7. And, well, after you block queen f7, now you go bishop to b2, you go after the pawn, and after d4, now rook b3, and it's gonna be hard. Black doesn't have useful moves here. At some point, you will be able to bust open the center, and then, well, the bishop will be just too strong. For example, you even have ideas when the position opens up. Rook captures on b7, for example, queen captures, and then you just play f7, delivering a deadly check from the bishop, and so on. A lot of tactics in the position. So Goryachkina instead went rook to g5, but now f4. Again, you cannot capture because rook captures queen, so rook captures on h5 was played, and here it's a very, very interesting moment in the game. So because strongest move here is g4, because after rook to h4 you have queen to f5 with the simple threat of just f7, push the queen away, then queen f6 check picks up the rook here, and then you'd have to go for this queen to g8 move. F7 attacks the queen, captures. You're gonna trade here, and after rook to g3 it's game over. You either trade and, well, then get another queen since the f8 square is guarded, or you capture on f4, but it doesn't really matter, just f8 queen, captures, and you are up a whole rook. So completely winning, but the Ju Wenjun calculates absolutely precisely f captures on e5. And now asks, what do you want to do here? Here, queen to e6 by Goryachkina, now threatening queen to h3. And here, although g4 was the absolute best move, this is also winning, but with, you need surgical precision here, or as we like to call it, engine precision. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the only winning move for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding the only move that wins this game. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's King G1. just so Queen h3 doesn't come with check. That's the point. And if you try something like g4, that doesn't work because, well, of course, not queen captures right away, allowing rook g3, but first rook here, and now you're in a lot of trouble. Rook g3, just knight captures on e5, and now it's actually black who's better. So after queen to e6, Ju Wenjun played king g1, and now we have d4 here attacking the rook. But again, pause the video, and there is only one good move for white here. So while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding the only move that wins for the second time in this video. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's queen to g6. And now, well, obviously, you cannot capture the rook because of queen g7 mate. You have to prevent mate. Queen to d7 was played just guarding this square, but now e6. Pushing the queen back, queen to c7, and now queen captures on h5, just winning a whole rook. And here you're just up a rook, and it was in this position on move 45 that Aleksandra Goryachkina resigned the game, and game 3 of the Rapids goes to Ju Wenjun. Because you're down a rook, and if you want to recapture a rook, otherwise, I mean, there's no point in playing a game being down a rook, especially in a position like this. There's nothing to do. So, for example, queen captures on h6. You cannot trade queens because, I mean, the two connected path pawns are too strong. And if here, just f7 check, and that's all there is. The king has no squares. You have to give up the queen. And other than that, after queen captures on h5, there's not much to do. You cannot go here because the rook guards g3. So, Ju Wenjun wins game 3 of the Rapids, and in game 4, Ju Wenjun was able to hold Goryachkina to a draw, which means after 16 games of the Women's World Chess Championship match, Ju Wenjun retains her World Chess Championship title. Here there's also a very nice photo of this moment. There you have it. You can see Ju Wenjun very happy, and Goryachkina, of course, not very happy, as she played brilliantly in the classical time format, and well, she was better out of the 4 games in the Rapid. She was better in 2 and winning in 1, but all 3 ended in a draw, and then she lost this one. So definitely a tough break. There's Arkady Dvorkovich to the right. I do not know who the woman on the left of Goryachkina is, so if any of you do know, do share. So you know, I like to learn stuff as well. But yeah, tough break for Goryachkina, but you know, there's always the second candidates tournament, and there's always the next World Chess Championship cycle, which is similar to something that FIDE will now again try to achieve. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it, and that you've enjoyed this coverage of the Women's World Chess Championship match. I would like to thank John Nicely, David Kaiser, or David Kajsa if you're maybe from Germany, Fawad Seragaldina, Krzysztof Urbanek, and Marian Bilic for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the, well, whatever happens next in the chess world at the moment, the Tata Steel Masters Edition. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Saturday.